This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have a rare rebuke from a former clerk to Justice Clarence Thomas, so the most conservative member of this Supreme Court, as it relates to this new issue that's being bubbled up to the surface that was debuted by Stephen Miller, which is that the Trump administration is considering suspending habeas corpus, meaning they could grab any American citizen off the streets, lock them up, and they have no recourse. No due process. And so that's what the administration is looking to do right now. So I'm going to put something on the screen that John Yoo said. Again, that's the former clerk to Clarence Thomas. He said that there is, quote, zero chance the courts would allow the suspension of habeas corpus over immigration, and that suspending habeas corpus would provide, quote, much stronger ground for impeachment than Trump's first two rides on that rodeo. So can I have your reaction to this, that even these right-wing conservative clerks for somebody as far right as Clarence Thomas are saying that not only does this idea of suspending habeas corpus not fly, legally speaking, but if it did, this would be stronger grounds for impeachment than Trump's first two impeachments when he was president?
Yeah, so first of all, people need to understand who John Yoo is. I mean, he was not just a clerk for Clarence Thomas, as you say, the most conservative justice on the Supreme Court. He was one of the principal architects or defenders of the torture memo process that we went through during the Iraq War, what was referred to at the time as enhanced interrogation techniques, rather. This included waterboarding, and he was among the lawyers working for the government who was providing justification for waterboarding and other such things that have since been, viewed as forms of torture. So this is not someone who comes naturally to criticizing executive authority. In fact, he is best known from that time period, but even since then, as a believer in a very, very robust view of executive power. He believes that the president has extraordinary authorities. And for him to say that it would be impeachable to suspend habeas corpus just tells you how wildly outside of the mainstream, and beyond not just the mainstream, outside of the fringe right, the idea of suspending the writ of habeas corpus is. But it's no surprise that that is being floated by Stephen Miller, who is not a lawyer, but who does traffic in these very, very extremist, white nationalist at times, xenophobic, but also totally disregarding the Constitution, unconstitutional deprivations of civil liberties. And so that is the state of affairs. That's who John Yoo is. That's who Stephen Miller is by reference point. But Donald Trump doesn't care about the John Yoos of the world. He's not an intellectually curious person. He doesn't care, that John Yoo may have be a supporter in 90% of the instances of a strong executive. If he doesn't support the most extreme thing, Donald Trump, finds him useless. And Donald Trump is just a 100% authoritarian wannabe. So he likes the idea of being able to do whatever he wants, and he enjoys. And this is the key. He enjoys the deprivation of civil rights, because by doing that, by showing that he can send people to an El Salvadorian gulag, by saying he can throw any one of us in jail and we do not get any due process, no hearing, no court appearances, nothing, he thinks it makes him look stronger.
Right. I want to dig into the idea of what it would mean in practice to eliminate or suspend habeas corpus, because I don't want to just assume that people know what it is. I think it's worth reiterating over and over and over again, if we need to, what it means. And I think, by the way, that Republicans use these concepts that aren't well known to a broad swath of Americans, because then they get to fly under the radar. And so can you talk about the practical implications of and the definition of habeas corpus as it relates to what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, so let me first tell you what it is and then tell you why it's so important. So right now, any person watching this video, whether they are a U.S. citizen in this country legally, in this country, a migrant who's not here under legal status, every person in this country, if they get thrown in jail, whether it's by the state government or by the federal government, they are entitled to file what is called a petition for a writ of habeas corpus with a federal court and say, I am being held unlawfully. Okay. I am being detained unlawfully, and a federal judge will review to see whether or not you are being held in violation of your constitutional rights or you are properly detained. And that is something that is enshrined in the fabric of this country because we were leaving a king, right? We were rebelling against a king. And the idea that there would be what's called the Great Writ, the ability of the courts to check even a king's ability to detain and imprison someone, was vitally important. So the founders of this country wanted to make sure that no matter who you are, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what crime you were accused of, no matter anything, you could always go before a federal judge and say, I'm being held wrongfully and I'm entitled to be released. The Constitution creates a very, very narrow carve out from that. So it requires three things. It requires a rebellion or an invasion, which there has not been. Number two, it requires that rebellion or invasion be threatening public safety. Like right now, Brian, you and I are talking about each other. Whatever else people may think about the woman who was grabbed off the street out of Tufts University, she's not threatening our public safety, right? There's not a threat to our public safety. And number three is that it is Congress that can suspend the writ of habeas corpus. It is not the president. The writ of habeas corpus is a check on the president. It was the check on the king. And so the narrow circumstances in which it can be suspended is when the legislative branch feels the need to give it. If you let the president suspend the writ of habeas corpus, every president would just suspend the writ of habeas corpus, right? Because it's a limit on their power.
And so how is this even a question when if it goes in front of any judge, shouldn't it just right then and there not satisfy the most blatant requirements that would be needed to actually suspend the writ of habeas corpus? You say you're the executive branch, you have no jurisdiction here, and so thrown out before we even get into one word of this case. The president can't bring forward a case where he's trying to suspend or eliminate the writ of habeas corpus.
Look, this is why this is so dangerous. It is the reason why this could very quickly unravel the rule of law and democracy and everything else. Okay, this would be a nuclear bomb explosion if this happened. Is harken back to a conversation you and I had recently about the Supreme Court trying to ban nationwide injunctions, which would mean that essentially every person who is detained under the writ of habeas corpus would have to sue to get their writ of habeas corpus back. But of course, it's a catch-22 because they're now being held by the federal government. So how are they supposed to access the courts? Right? The writ of habeas corpus is the great writ because it is the thing that guarantees you the ability to be brought before a judge. But Brian, if Donald Trump just decrees and declares that the writ of habeas corpus has been suspended, and he mobilizes the military and federal law enforcement to grab 10,000 people, you, me, and 9,998 other people who we know, and throw us all in prison, sure, there would be an effort to get us out and there would be petitions filed. But if they have to each be filed one by one and you're being held incommunicado in some detention center in Louisiana, where are we then? And then, Brian, he flies you out of Louisiana to El Salvador. And then what do you
That's right. Correct. Well, then we just rely on the goodwill of Bukele to just release us because he's been so willing to do that in the past.
Yeah, and everybody needs that. Yeah, I know what you all are thinking. You're thinking, all right, but what they did in El Salvador is bad, but they did that with someone who wasn't a U.S. citizen. There is no difference. The writ of habeas corpus is there to protect persons. If it's not protecting that guy, it's not protecting you. And by the way, go look up about the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old U.S. citizens who were sent out of this country in violation of their rights as U.S. citizens.
And so I guess the obvious question, the natural question here, and especially it's worth asking you because, you are on the front lines of defending democracy in the courts, is what can we do from the outside? What can you do from the outside as this issue continues to bear down on us? And I mean, this is like the slow moving, although I would argue it's not so slow, but the slow moving descent into autocracy happening right before our eyes.
Yeah. So look, this is one of these things where everyone needs to be educated and everyone needs to educate their friends. I mean, I created Democracy Docket in part to be a tool to educate people about what's happening to democracy and particularly democracy in court. And you and I have been doing these videos now, more than 300 of them, by the way. Everyone, thank you for watching. We were just ranked one of the most viewed podcasts on YouTube. So thank you, everyone. Please make sure you share this podcast with your friends and on social media so that we can spread this word. But it is important that now more than ever, we are all sharing with our circles of friends, our coworkers, with on our social media feeds, in our bridge clubs and our book clubs. Like we all need to be sharing this information because you may think everyone knows what's going on with Donald Trump, but they don't know exactly. They may have a sense that he's taking a plane he shouldn't be taking, and he's screwing with the prices of eggs and the prices of goods, and that the legacy media is failing, but they don't know the details and they don't necessarily understand what the writ of habeas corpus is. So do me a favor right now, share this video with everyone you know. Like go click on the share button and post it on your Facebook, your Instagram, your Blue Sky, Twitter, whatever it is. Go share this video because people need to know what's going on. And also make sure you're subscribed to Brian's channel because I learn more from watching Brian every day than I do watching any of the legacy media. And I hope you also subscribe to Democracy Docket.
Well, I would echo that message, and I appreciate the kind words, but highly recommend for everybody who's watching right now to give Marc and his team an even bigger voice in this YouTube media ecosystem, which is, the biggest search engine in the world at this point. Please make sure to subscribe to Democracy Docket. That's Marc's channel on YouTube. If you're not aware that he had a channel on YouTube, this is his channel on YouTube. Please go ahead and subscribe so that we can continue to amplify his voice and make sure that people in the broader YouTube ecosystem can hear from him. So I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.